All right, everyone, it looks like Donald Trump is going to withdraw the U.S. from the Paris climate deal, and I strongly support this, and I'll tell you why. As somebody who is a proponent of solar and wind, as probably the future energy needs of the United States and the world at large, here's my problem with the Paris Accords. The Paris Accords would take money that would probably be better spent subsidizing green energy here in the U.S., benefiting U.S. industry, takes that money, expects us to pay. It's not some benevolent government body that gets a bunch of philanthropists to pay for these programs. It's the regular average Joe taxpayer that'll have to foot the bill. They want the United States, Canada, Western Europe, and Oceania to pony up enormous sums of money to build solar fields in the third world that don't even benefit us. Now, here's my question. If I put up a solar panel on my roof here, is that generating any less energy than putting up a solar panel on a roof in Uganda? No. So if the bottom line is that you're worried about reducing CO2 emissions by investing in green energy, it doesn't matter where you invest in it. It doesn't matter. So why not just invest it here in the U.S.? We can meet all the markers of the Paris Climate Accord while we help U.S. industry, while we lower the cost on the middle and upper middle class to install home solar here. Why don't we do this instead of signing the Paris Climate Accord? Why don't we become an energy juggernaut beyond just now fracking and having more natural gas and oil than we could ever even possibly use? We've already got that energy boom. Why don't we have a green energy boom? Here's how you accomplish it. It's very, very simple. Right now, U.S. solar firms and wind firms are less competitive because of the regulatory cost associated with installing those systems for people's own personal use, which are the most lucrative. It makes sense in a free market arrangement. If I were to invest in home solar, a significant proportion of the overall cost has nothing to do with installing it or building the panels or maintaining it or anything like that. It's regulatory. It's, oh, the state wants $4,000 as a fee for you to build one of these systems. The federal government wants a few $1,000s too. By the way, we ended a bunch of subsidies for green energy for home use as well. Those were allowed to expire by Obama, no less. Yeah, really, really great move for the climate, I suppose, if that's your main concern. If the climate is the concern, why not invest in it here? We can prop up U.S. industry here. Those firms that build and install solar cells, home wind systems, whatever it happens to be, they will go through the roof. They will hire a bunch of people. It will drop unemployment. That brings in more tax revenue to pay for the subsidy. It's quite simple. Solar's efficiency especially has risen astronomically over the last 10 years. We can now 3D print solar systems. We can make roof shingles that generate solar power. We can make solar systems that literally replace windows. They're fully transparent. There's no difference between the window next to me and one of these solar systems, except that it generates power. It's not even that much more expensive than most conventional materials. It is possible to make this work, but we might as well benefit the U.S. taxpayer and U.S. industry in so doing. We don't need to send that money overseas. If we're going to generate that power with green energy, let's do it here. Here's the other thing. Right now, the U.S., I remember this was tied into, I think, the Bundy Ranch shit. With the Bundy Ranch shit, the BLM said, oh, this land has endangered species. You can't use it to graze your cattle. We have to protect it. Very soon thereafter, they lease it off to a Chinese company to build a bunch of solar cells. A bunch of solar panels on what had been fallow land populated by endangered animals. Why don't you, with the higher efficiency of solar, simply mount it on people's roofs? Subsidize it. People would jump at the chance and say, yeah, I'd love a solar roof. The government's going to give me a cut off of the electric bill or a subsidy on my taxes in exchange for using my roof to mount these panels. Sure, yeah, go ahead. Build it. Put up 2 systems. Put them on both sides. I don't care if it's less efficient on the northern side. Go ahead. Put it on my garage too. Can I have a system on my car? They'd love it. And it props up U.S. industry in so doing. We can make this work here in the United States. We don't need to give... Here's the other problem. You give that money to the UN, it is a post-national authority like the EU. And so most of that money isn't going to make it to the third world. It's going to get squandered into the pockets of bureaucrats that work with the UN. Then, when you give it to the third world, what little is left, warlords and tin horn dictators and cartels are going to siphon off most of what's left. So you're going to be spending, I don't know, probably $1 million a solar panel, subsidizing it. The left here will think it's some great thing until they realize the reality on the ground is that the program is a monumental failure. It will fail. The Western Europeans pretending to be so high and mighty and moral because we're going to pay for the third world to have better electrical sources. Go ahead and see what happens. 5, 10 years down the road. Don't say I didn't warn you. Most of those systems will never be built. It will take a lot longer to build them because it's a bureaucratic nightmare. They will be far more expensive. Many of them will never be built in the first place. Some will be destroyed by warlords or by religious zealots anyway. It's going to be a free-for-all. And the EU authorities and the UN authorities are going to squander most of that money. They're going to take most of the money for themselves. They'll line their own pockets with it. Watch. See if I'm not right. We can prevent that from happening here, but we can't work with the UN on such a program. They want our money and we get no benefit for it other than, oh, you helped with climate change. And these same, by the way, these same Western Europeans saying, oh, we're going to have to lead the Paris Climate Accord because the US might withdraw. This is regrettable. The US is no longer a leader in the world. You harped on us for 15 years not to be a leader in the world, saying the US needs to take a diplomatic backseat. The US needs to stop leading in military endeavors. The US needs to stop dicking around and pretending to be holier than thou. They can't be the world police. They can't be the leader of the world. We need a democratized, Western European-led world. Well, if that's what you want, you go ahead and fund the program. You're always telling us, no, sit in the back of the bus, you evil, despicable, bigoted, imperialistic Americans. Well, then why should we fund this program for you? No, well, a lot of people here feel bitter towards the UN. We feel mistreated by them. We feel like we're expected to fund everything. We fund most of NATO. We fund the military apparatus that defends the West, and what do we get called? We get called imperialists for doing so. And that's a different from the proxy war bullshit. That is imperialism. Or really, it's corporatism on behalf of the Bush family, mostly, or the Obamas and Clintons. They love to go bomb third worlders. And what happens, by the way, when you invest in one of these and then you have to bomb the country that you've installed solar cells in because they have regime change and some dictator that doesn't want to work with you and wants a gold standard back decides to take power? What happens then? Are you going to bomb your own solar fields, your own windmills to keep them more impoverished, to keep them from generating power that'll be used for human rights abuses? They're using the solar cells to make sarin or something like that. Of course they will. Of course you will. All these post-national deals don't work. They're all very good on paper. Oh, we're going to help the climate. We're going to help the environment. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, a round of applause for you, but it won't work. It's not going to work because you're going to be putting up these systems in unstable countries. They'll get attacked. Bureaucrats will siphon most of that away anyway. Warlords will siphon most of the rest. Hurrah, it took you $1 million to hook up one home solar system in Uganda or in Nigeria or Laos or something. That's just wonderful. No, I'd rather build them here. Why don't we get rid of the regulatory burden associated with home solar and wind and so forth? Stop using fallow land and letting foreign firms build it. Use U.S. firms and subsidize them instead. We make jobs right here. A lot of solid middle-class jobs, too. There are going to have to be a lot of people who are making a decent income. They're going to be machinists and truckers and installing these things. They'll be blue-collar workers. They'll be making, you know, 30 to 60K a year. That's just fine. There's some tax revenue for you. Almost pays off the subsidies you're using in the first place. As long as it's efficient, that's why you need private industry to be involved. And it should be competitive. Don't just work with one firm, work with them all. Every solar firm, every wind-based firm. That's the future of energy production. It's more clean. But we should have that here. Now, I don't care if it's polluted in some slum in Bangladesh. They've got their own problems. They need to work on their own problems. It's not immoral to say that, to suggest that they should take care of their own fucking society. You're always saying the U.S. shouldn't involve itself in other people's societies. Oh, be culturally sensitive. You can't judge others. Now, you can't just bomb people because they try to bomb you on a regular basis. Well, then why should we have to pay for their home solar systems or whatever the hell the UN is suggesting we do there? I oppose the Paris Climate Accords. I'm glad we'll be leaving it. It'd be a terrible idea. We'll end up having more taxes, more debt, and we won't get a good result. What's the point? There is none. The UN just wants that money so that it can steal most of it, which is always what the UN does. Screw the UN. That's about all. Peace out.